And then, there we go, there it goes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to Devil's Gate History Club for this month of March. We're really excited about our speaker tonight. I have a few announcements to make prior to our introduction of our wonderful speaker. I want to tell you, first of all, we have a can back there near the door and a wonderful frame of something that Kevin will discuss in a minute. But the purple can back there is for contributions for the community center to keep them rolling and to be allowed to be using this. So if you have $1 or $2 or whatever you would like to contribute in the can there, it goes to the community center to help maintain this wonderful meeting hall. Another announcement is that we usually have our meetings on the third Friday of each month. Next month, which is April, will be on the second Friday, because the gentleman who can be here to discuss his program can come only on the second Friday. So the second Friday, April 12th, will be our Devil's Gate for April. The gentleman who will be speaking about the old Boy Scout camp that is up near Herman Gulch, which is on the way to Loveland. And he has pictures of this old Boy Scout camp, and it's 1920s and 1930s. It was also known as the Bethel area to some of us that know that. So he will be, and it's also at the place where they have a chain-up truck for eastbound. So when the guys come through the tunnel, they can take their chains off. So it's right about that area. So that will be April 12th, the second Friday. Now, the third Friday also will have a program here, but it is being sponsored by the Friends of the Library. It is their annual meeting. It will be at 7 o'clock. And with their annual meeting, they will have a program of a presentation of the women of the West. There is a woman by the name of Susie Solomon from Idaho Springs who will be giving the presentation. And she apparently will be doing it with some music and some maybe drama, whatever. So that it will be the third Friday. So we have another history thing in a way. So that is what is happening on the second Friday of April and our third Friday of April. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Clark here, who will give us the wonderful background of our great speaker for the evening.
Not too much.
Oh, gee. Just hold it. Wow. Nice crowd. I think we all know Kevin Kuharik. He has kind of been everywhere lately. He has been appointed to the school board. He's on the promotions. Okay, good night. That's it. He's on the promotions commission. He's on the design review commission. And oh yes, he's the director of the Hotel de Paris Museum. So I think that's good to get you started. Give a warm welcome to Kevin.
All right. Hello, everybody. Let me just get mic'd up here. Let's see. These presentations are recorded, and they can be checked out from the John Tomei Memorial Public Library, and so that's what this contraption is on my shoulder now. I have a few thank yous to make before getting started. First, I'd like to thank Mary Clark for suggesting that I do another program for Devil's Gate History Club. I'll tell you, it's really opened my eyes about Georgetown, and I find walking through town now it's more meaningful. Because I can imagine what was in some of these vacant lots and where some of the new houses are, and so it's sort of fun to see the layers emerging. So thank you. I wouldn't have seen it as soon without your suggestion and encouragement. I'd like to also thank Sharon Racino, Executive Director of Historic Georgetown Incorporated, for the loan of the data projector, very important because it's a very visual presentation tonight. And also, if you didn't see it upon entering, there's a beautiful frame on the back table, and in that frame is an original key to the Barton House, one of the historic hotels in Georgetown that no longer exists. It's absolutely beautifully framed, so make sure to take a look at that sometime tonight. I'd like to thank my parents, Bill and Marcia Kuharik, for driving in from Pueblo. Thank you. And we think it's been probably about 20 years or so since they've seen me speak publicly. Paul Boat, also towards the front here, I'd like to thank him for his research tips and encouragement for this presentation. Thank you. Jeanette Peterson of Dusty Rose Tea Room for the information that she shared with me about the St. James Hotel, and also allowing me access into the Dusty Rose during business hours to allow me to take an interior photograph. Thank you. And also Christine Bradley and Alexis Aragut of the Clear Creek County Archives for historic images and content. So now we'll begin. So it was not a threat when I said this is a participatory beginning to this presentation. We're going to try something. I've never done this in a presentation. We're going to do an audience quiz. All right? So we're going to test your knowledge about historic hotels. And the reason I'm doing this is so many visitors to Hotel de Paris think that that was the only hotel in Georgetown, simply because it's the most recognizable. It looks like a hotel. It says hotel on the side of it. So that must have been the hotel. So let's leave the lights up for just a second. We're going to do a show of hands, and so I want everyone to be able to see this show of hands. Okay, so we're going to start by everybody raising a hand. So everybody raise a hand. And as I read numbers, when I get to your number, put your hand down. Okay, what's going to happen is you're going to see sort of what everybody believes the number of hotels was during, let's say, post-Civil War to World War I, that sort of era. Okay, so 3. And don't follow my lead. I'm just raising my hand with you. Okay, so if I put my hand down, I may be lying. Okay, 3. 5. Okay, some hands down. 10. Okay, significant number. 15 hotels. Okay, almost all gone. 20 hotels. We have a couple of risk takers in the room. Wow, it's a personality test too. Okay, we're still doing it. 25. Hands are gone. 33 people. Okay, yeah, shocking. So when I started to figure out that there were this many, it becomes addictive, the research, okay? And so 33, quite astounding. So here, there are not 33 stars up there. I will tell you, I don't know the locations of every single one of these, but this is the majority. And the reason I have this slide up there is to sort of show you the concentration. I think it's really important to see. Some of the hotels that are missing, Eldridge House, Globe Hotel, Cottage Hotel, Newton Hotel. This is about the only mention I'm going to give of those in my presentation because I simply don't know anything more than the names at this point. But notice that most of them are in the business district, except for one right there. And we will come to that one later. So think about why that one may be the odd ball. Why do you think so many hotels were in Georgetown? Well, I'll tell you. People who lived in Georgetown who were reporters were telling folks to come see us. Does that sound very different than the heritage tourism we're doing today? Sounds like us. So here's an article from the Denver Daily Times in 1873 that said, thousands of people leave the great cities every summer and spend hot months at the mountains, beaches, and watering places to recruit for the winter's dissipation. Colorado is sought more by the educated and those who love the sublime, the grand, more than the merely fashionable. So it sounds like people who live here, educated and lovers of the sublime. Okay. The Daily Colorado Miner in 1872 said, Georgetown has many home institutions of which her citizens are justly proud. Prominent among these are her excellent hotels. Our best hotels have the elegance, style, and comforts of similar first-class establishments in eastern cities without any of their obnoxious features. And it elaborates. The inevitable, gorgeous, stunning, and overpowering hotel clerk does not flourish in this region. Okay? Whatever that's worth. Okay. So, basically, what they were telling folks was Georgetown was a good starting point. In 1886, American hotels were promoted as the largest, best conducted, and most comfortable in the world. Lights are great. Perfect. Thank you. And in the West, the best accommodations could be had for $1.50 to $3. Louis Dupuis charged $3 to $4, so he was slightly above that. And those are some local scenes, some stereoscopic scenes there. Stereoscopic scenes are very popular with armchair travelers. So this photo collage, people came to Georgetown for its abundance of romantic spots and for scenery excursions. Little has changed. In 1872, the Colorado Miner reported thousands of people flock every summer to view our grand mountain scenery and enjoy the exhilarating effects of our pure, elevated atmosphere. That's boosterism. Also, mountain guides could provide equipment. You could arrange for equipment to go on these excursions, and so you could come here with your suitcases, be thrown on the back of a burro, and go out for a picnic or a snowball fight up in the mountains. Now, some terms we're going to deal with. Boarding houses. This is not a talk about boarding houses, nor is it a talk about brothels. So this is where the room empties out, I'm sure. Maybe next time we'll do that. There are terms that are sort of interchangeable. Sometimes they're murky and they get mixed up. But largely I'm ignoring boarding houses, although at times some boarding houses call themselves hotels. So, just sort of go with it a little bit. I try to concentrate on the ones that are hotels. And so sometimes little things will creep in. Some of you might recognize the house here. That's the McNulty House. It's on 7th Street. And then the little cluster of buildings in the other photo is something called KT Boarding House. These boarding houses were different than hotels in that they offered something called the American Plan. The American Plan was a cost reduction if arrangements were made for longer periods of time. Say if you were to stay a few days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, the cost would drop. And so they were looking for long-term tenants to stay there. But we're not going to concentrate on that. We're going to go straight into hotels like the Barton House. It might amaze you that hotel visitation in Georgetown in 1879 was reported at 32,000 registered hotel guests. So this is not a guess. These are real numbers, 32,000. The Yates House reported 17,009 guests that year. The Barton House reported 5,786 guests. The American House reported 3,849 guests. Ennis House reported 2,208 guests. Star Hotel reported 1,660 guests. And Centennial Hotel reported 1,485 guests. Now, the slides. I'm going to explain sort of the content of these slides. There's a lot to look at as these come up. A few of you have mentioned the suitcases. Those are important to look at in these slides. This is where you will see the establishment dates of the hotels. Barton House is unusual. You'll see 2 dates there, and that's because there was a fire that destroyed the first Barton House, and so it was rebuilt. And so it's the same business operating in 2 different structures on the same piece of land. So a little bit different. So those are your dates up there. Barton catered to tourists, hunting and fishing parties, and was listed in Moses King's publication, Where to Stop, a guide to the best hotels in the world. That was printed in 1894, 1895. And from the etching you saw, it was pretty splendid. Barton was known as one of the oldest, largest, and best hotels in Clear Creek County. In fact, Jefferson Davis and a group of his traveling companions stayed there in 1875. Something else to look at on the slides is something called a Sanborn Fire Insurance Map, and so I've done excerpts. They're larger than this, but I've tried to sort of hone in on the particular area so you can sort of visualize what part of town these are in. So you'll recognize some of the street names if you're familiar with Georgetown, and I have them circled so you can see the structures. So in the case of some of the hotels where I could not find a historic image and the building is no longer there, you'll have to rely on your imagination and the Sanborn map to see sort of the outline of the building. Sanborn maps are great for research. They also tell you what the building was made of, how it was heated, how many stories it was. So in the case of this, it's hard to read it. Maybe you can't read it at all from there, but this is a 2, which tells us that portion is 2 stories. This is a 1 that tells us that that portion of the building was 1 story. And then when you look at the historic image, that information is corroborated, so you know you've got it right. All right. In the case of the then and now slides, look for points of reference such as the mountains in the background. I worked very hard to try to stand close to or on the same spot of ground where the historic images were taken, so either you could see exactly how it's changed or how little it's changed. Usually it's how much it's changed. And then from the list, I'm not going to read you all of that. In fact, I'm probably not going to read you any of that on the left there. But it's a good idea of some of the staff that was at the Barton House. It was one of the biggest hotels in town and employed lots and lots of people. So there are many proprietors, clerks, managers listed there. And it's important to understand that proprietors can be owners, but proprietors could also be somebody leasing it from an owner, so that term sort of is tossed around a little bit. A manager, a head clerk, and a proprietor are all probably doing the same thing, but sometimes a proprietor and an owner would be equal. And then the same thing comes, there's a little confusion between house and hotel, those 2 terms. Houses were hotels, and so American house, American hotel, and sometimes even in articles you'll see those things are interchangeable. So here's an example of a then and now shot of Barton House. And so this is the first Barton House and the second Barton House. And with the highway going in up there, it's hard to see exactly the mountain matching up, but I tried to get about the same elevation, and you see what's standing there is the Georgetown Community School. And that, my understanding is it was a WPA era building, so from the 1930s, let's say, and it took that spot. And so this is Taos Street at 4th. And then we have the Leggett House, which later became the Ennis House. So here we have a case of a building serving 2 different hotel companies. And so it starts off being built as the Leggett House fairly early, 1868, 1869. And the Leggetts were the proprietors. And then right about when the name changes, about 1871, in comes Thomas Ennis, and then it becomes the Ennis House. And so he must acquire that property from the Leggetts. If an ad said table excellent, that means that it served food. And so it would have had a kitchen. And so this one had a table excellent. It was known to be tasteful, comfortable, and convenient, and home-like. Very important to travelers to feel at home and comfortable. It was made new and magnificent in 1872, so Ennis wanted to put his thumbprint on it and change it to his taste. A 2-story addition was added off the back and damaged by wind. In Georgetown, damaged by wind. I know, it's shocking. You won't see that happen again to another hotel, wink, wink. And so then they had to repair that and was eventually completed in 1874. And then Miss Aunt Kate Ennis becomes proprietor. That was the sister of Thomas Ennis. And that is another thing. We know about Auntie Sophie, Sophie Galley at Hotel de Paris, but there were at least 2 other women who were proprietors in Georgetown that went by Aunt. And so that seemed to be sort of a typical way to address a woman proprietor during the period. All right. The cost was $2 a day, so not low end, not high end, sort of in the middle. And one sad note about the Ennis house is that a suicide did occur there. In 1883, Sheriff Charles Royer of Grand County shot himself in his room. He was involved in a scandal in Grand County and felt responsible for some deaths, and so he eventually came to Georgetown and committed suicide. The building was vacant by 1907, and then it was demolished by Sarah Burkholder. Some of you may recognize that name, another connection to Hotel de Paris. She was the woman who, with her husband, acquired the property, started running it in 1901 after Louis and Sophie's deaths, and then purchased it in 1903, and then for 2 generations, the Burkholders ran Hotel de Paris until 1954. So she was sort of clearing up and cleaning out the area around Hotel de Paris. That's important to know because this is not the only case of a demolition overseen by her. Initially, the thought was that a library would be built there, and that never did occur. So here we have Leggett House, Ennis House, and then what we refer to as the upper lot, and that is the parking lot at the corner of Taos and Fifth. I know, amazing. And can you see how the mountains match up, especially from this shot to that shot? Okay, so use those points of reference. Next, we have the McCoy House, which later is renamed the Arnold House. So 2 hotels in the same structure. So we'll end up having more hotel names than buildings, is what I guess I'm trying to explain. It's interesting to see connections between these establishments as well. For instance, Phileas and Seitz, proprietors of the McCoy House, were also proprietors of Girard House. So what I think is they were pretty much into development. They were building businesses, and this is why they would have interests in these 2 different establishments. Many proprietors, managers, and head clerks, sometimes they were husband and wife teams, would work at a number of local hotels, and so you will see names repeated on staff lists for different institutions. And that one's still with us. It is now known as the Mahaney Building or Bob Burned Out Building. Okay, but now it is some office space and some 2 apartments, I believe. Okay. The next one is the Doyle House. Doyle House was run by Daniel Doyle. He was known to be an experienced hotel keeper. He was from County Clare, Ireland. 3 doors south of his hotel were medicated vapor baths run by Dr. William J. Eagles. Medicated vapor baths were therapeutic and contained incense, myrrh, benzoin, amber, sulfur, and calomel. Perhaps like the business center, the proximity of the baths to this hotel would be a draw. It's also important to note that Main Street, so this is a very early hotel, Main Street would have been the main way of coming into town. Later, Argentine was. And so what Doyle is doing here is he's near something that would attract customers, the baths, and he's going to be one of the first hotels to be seen. So he's skimming off customers. Okay, so he's a smart guy. I know, well. Oops. There we go. So we have pictures of Doyle House. And so this is right where Biddle and Main merge, right at that fork. And there today, we have a private residence, the Wahlberg residence, and the Wahlbergs are here tonight. Hello. They saw me standing in front of their home maybe about a month today, taking pictures, and they thought I was going to frame them for something. But indeed, I was just doing research. And this is another great shot. And right here is the top of the Doyle House. So that top corner, the D-O, and you can see it is not there today. But that's changed somewhat, but you can still find the spot. And that's what's so exciting about it for me, is that it's really not totally gone.
Kevin, what happened to the mineral springs?
I don't know. I don't know. It would have been very close to the creek, which made sense just for the supply of water. But I didn't do any research on when that closed and why. But it's interesting to me. A lot of people were coming up here for health reasons, therapeutic reasons, as I read earlier. Oftentimes we think it's just for the clean air and the dryness, but apparently things like the therapeutic baths would be included in reasons to come here for good health, spa things that we would call them today. Okay. And then we have next the Girard House, which later became the American House. There was great difficulty in saving this hotel in January of 1892 due to a large fire in downtown Georgetown, and that's when we lost the McClellan Opera House. This was right next to the McClellan, on the back wall of it, right behind the stage. And in fact, firemen here in Georgetown tried to fight the fire from the upper floors of the American House. They dragged hoses inside. There was stifling smoke and heat. The building was scorched, and there was a lot of damage done by the water to the American House in efforts to fight the fire in the Opera House. So not too long after the fire, American House closed. It was dilapidated by 1900. Demolished in 1904 by Sarah Burkholder, again cleaning up the area around Hotel de Paris. She was able to do this because she was acquiring that property. She purchased Block 20 lots 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8 between the years 1902 and 1908. And these parcels are what comprise the parking lots adjacent to Hotel de Paris today. So here we have Girard House, American House. So this little building right here was a tavern, and that would have stood about where these boulders are. And so you have to sort of imagine this. You can sort of picture the mountain at the top as a point of reference. And then here's a different view right after the fire at the Opera House. So the floor and the stage are still there. There's the scorched wall of the American House right there. So they were closed in trying to figure out what to do.
Kevin, was that a three-story hotel?
Let's go back. Oh gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it was quite large. It went back quite a ways too, and so we can see that right here. Okay, so here's the front, and then it looks like an addition, and I think that may even be theirs too. So, yeah. These went way back and way up. Lots of wood. Okay. Next we have the Phelps House, and also known as the Commercial House. So again, 2 hotels operating in the same building. This one was on Argentine at the corner of 3rd and was originally built as a residence. And again, I think what we're seeing is this would have been the residence, and then when it converts into a business, they build on the back. It offered food as well. The Mittens were proprietors. The Beckers, a husband and wife team, you see their name at different hotels. George Sharp, T.J. Laney. They were sort of a moderate price, $1.50 to $2 a day. And then it was eventually demolished in 1913 after being long vacant. And what is there today, so there's what it looked like. You'll probably recognize the Hamel House right across the side street there. And today it's the front lawn of the Criley Cabin. Okay. Next, this is probably, no, not this one. William Becker, we saw the name Becker just a moment ago. He managed the Milton House and the Commercial Hotel. Also proprietor Sam DeMott, who ran a billiards hall, was a manager here. That billiards hall still stands. In fact, I think it's just right behind us, right over here. It's on Rose Street. The Yates House was started to skim off the customers who were coming down this way into town. So Main Street starts to get abandoned a bit by travelers, and then Brownell Argentine starts to pick up. And so here again is positioning to grab those customers. The other interesting thing about this is that instead of a man or a husband and wife or developers doing it, there was Charlie Yates and Company, who was Charlie Yates and daughter, and the daughter ran it for quite a while too. I never found her called Aunt though, so that's a little bit different. So maybe the exception. The post office is where the Yates House stood. So it's not the same building, similar in scale, but the Yates House came all the way out to the street where the parking is to the side. And you can see that it goes quite a ways back, and it did actually span the creek. So a lot of these buildings did stand over creeks, which is pretty interesting. Another great shot, and then the circle up here, that's a shingle that's sticking out from the front that says Yates House. That same shingle you can spot there, but instead of it saying Yates, it says City, City Hotel when it changes names. All right, and then we talked about the people coming here to town to go on excursions. I think that's a great illustration of that, where you don't have to bring your burro with you. You could hire that. And so there were lots of liveries in town. Webb's Hotel, one that fascinates me, but I know very little about it, unfortunately. Its location seems to be the most significant observation I can make. It stood at the jog of Argentine and 6th Street. Again, right there, you're coming right down at it, and it's basically right on the intersection, so it's the first thing you see. If you're a tired traveler, you say, let's just check in. Where it is, right here, so here's Yates House City Hotel. So competition. Oops. So an aerial view. So this is Spring Street running behind this big rock right here. Okay. So it's facing north. And there's the best I could find of the facade right there. So it's called a 2-story and a 1-story on the Sanborn fire insurance maps, and sure enough corroborated. It also had a shingle out front that says Webb's Hotel, and today it's where the Sanford residence is on that corner. Okay. Hotel Paris. You didn't think I'd leave that out? It was hard not to talk a lot about this one. I'll probably talk less about it simply because I'm biased. But it was known to attract epicures by offering delicacies of the season. And I thought that was sort of neat because that's such a hook today for people who are foodies. They like that seasonal food. It has been said that guests included President Ulysses S. Grant, Baron de Rothschild, and Prince de Joinville. And thanks to research by volunteer Connie Primus, who's sitting right here in the front row, we do know that Countess Magree, who was the former Mrs. Tom Thumb, was a guest at Hotel de Paris. I would have loved to have seen a 32-inch tall woman going up the steps in a Victorian dress. So thank you, Connie, for that tidbit. It's fascinating. She may have been carried up. There you go. The Forbes building, you might wonder what that structure is up there. Eventually, as the ownership changed and the Burkholders did lease this out, so we say that they ran it for 2 generations. They did, but they weren't there every day. They had folks who would come in and serve as managers, clerks, or proprietors as well, and so they would lease it for numbers of years and then come back in, run it, lease it again. But apparently she was outgrowing it at some point because she wanted to lease the Forbes building in 1916 for boarders and for office use. And so she was really quite the business person. And so I'll never look at that building across the side street the same. It's right across Taos from us, and so it explains why she would be interested in it. This is a very well-known photograph, very old photograph of Georgetown looking down 6th Street facing west. And this is the Delmonico Bakery, and I've circled the doorway here. This is the same doorway right there. Louis Dupuis, I think many of you know, started renting the Delmonico in 1875, renaming it Hotel de Paris. And then after 3 years of leasing it, he buys it and then starts to improve it. But that doorway has remained largely the same, certainly in the same location. And then another shot. And I've been telling you, you're going to think I'm a liar now. I keep telling you, line up the mountains. You have a little problem here. It was snowing, though, so that's my excuse. I didn't move the mountain or get the shot wrong. Okay, now this is the hotel that was probably renamed the most times. So it's one structure, but all these different businesses were in the same spot. So the building is the International Hotel and Restaurant, now known as the St. James Hotel. It's where the Dusty Rose Tea Room and the miniature store is. And so it was built in 1875 by John Ortley, and it offered a European plan. The cost was $2 to $2.50 a day. The restaurant would offer you 35-cent meals. If you weren't staying there, you could be a local and go and have a meal there for 35 cents. It was known as the Delmonico of the mountains, sort of like the reuse of Hotel de Paris. That name you see all over the country. There were a couple of them in California. There was one in Idaho Springs. It's sort of a good housekeeping stamp of approval, and so is Delmonico. It means it's a cut above, basically. It was remodeled and redecorated as the St. Andrew restaurant in 1880. It had a proprietress, Miss Mary Brown, in 1880. Then it becomes Thompson, operating as the Dewey in the early 20th century, and then the St. James. This one, some great photos exist. This is a wonderful one. This is thanks to Christine Bradley, and I know this is one of her favorite images. It's become one of my favorite images. Not the easiest one to figure out exactly where to stand, and I think I figured out my mistake here. I don't think I was back far enough. I think this is 7th Street when I was thinking this was 7th Street. So I think if I would have backed up a little bit, the mountain would have risen up and gotten me the shot just right. But I'm on the right track with that one. And how I love burros. Look at those friendly things. They're gorgeous.
And the one tree up there.
Yeah. And then who knows who the couple is? Maybe that's Ortley. Who knows? But the circle right there is around the International Restaurant sign. So the restaurant wasn't in that Monty block, but it was in a little building right next door. Where that is now is the outdoor dining for Dusty Rose. And then down here, I believe this served at some point as a Chinese laundry. It's gone. It's all parking there right now. But that's a pretty good angle there. And then, of course, the marquee. And then this great little bar down here. And let me tell you about the bar. They're like, talk away. The St. James Bar, I learned from Jeanette, had a saying painted on it. The saying was written by American writer Eugene Field, and it was a salute. It was written in Denver in 1882, and it reads, "Fill up your glass, O comrade true, with sparkling wine that cheers, and let us drink a bumper to the sturdy pioneers." So by 1880, the hotel market in Georgetown was very competitive, and I think this ad of 3 ads run side by side really shows you that marketing had to happen if you were going to beat out your competitors for those customers. Alpine House. Alpine House actually is just a few yards, or was just a few yards beyond this back wall of the building that we're in on 5th Street. It was renovated in 1880, still operating in 1886, and demolished around 1907. There were a lot of buildings torn down around 1907, many hotels. I mentioned the billiards hall earlier. There's Samuel DeMont's billiards hall, and there's Alpine House there. Alpine House was right across from a livery stable. And at first I thought, why would you want rooms right across from such a smelly business? Then I realized that I was looking at it at 21st century eyes. A 19th century person wouldn't think that a livery was necessarily smelly. The other thing is proximity. Just like the business district and the baths, if you were coming here for an excursion and you could hire a burro right across the street, that's probably a good hotel to stay in. And so here's an aerial view. So these would be up Guanella Pass looking down. And the livery is right there. Big structure right there, right out the front door. So convenience. and this is what's there today. Basically, it's the alley and the back portion of, I always want to say Quest. It's not Quest anymore. CenturyLink. So that's about where Alpine House stood. Then we have the Georgetown House. Georgetown House, it's also gone. Established about 1880, and it was on the lower end of the scale, $1.25 a day. Surprisingly, they offered food. Usually, the less you paid, the less amenities there were. And this is where it stood. Again, matching up that mountain, you can see. All right. And then the Star Hotel. Still open in 1886, so at really a very busy time for Georgetown, making lots of money. But then by 1890, it was being reused as a bakery. Coincidentally, it's not too far from our town's bakery, Cake, right over here on the intersection. This is what's there today. I don't know if that's the same structure, though. It stands about where the Star would have, but I don't know when that structure was built, if it just occupies the same piece of ground. Hard to know right now. Galena. This slide makes me sad. This is the sad slide. I don't know if it's Galena House, Galena Hotel. It was in operation in 1880, and that's all I know. And so this is part of the mystery that still exists, and it's going to keep me looking, basically. Milton House, not too different. Although considered a primary hotel in 1880, little information is found on this anymore. And perhaps the name is wrong. You might remember in an earlier slide there were proprietors named Mitten, or that's how I pronounce it, M-Y-T-O-N. So is it possible that it's not Milton but Mitten instead? So it's just something for me to think about and try to track down. We do know that the Beckers, who worked at many hotels over the years here, were managers also at this one. They also managed the Yates House and the commercial hotel. The Elliott House. I think you're ready for it. I think it's time for a scandal. What do you think? Okay. I'm going to start passing something through the room, and you're going to take a look at it, see if I can find it. And so if you'll just pass it up and down the rows. Holly knows what this is. In 1899, a love triangle existed between Sarah Burkholder, of Hotel de Paris eventually, her husband James, and J.K. Gage, an alleged romantic interest of Sarah's. The Silver Standard reported Gage, it appears, has been staying at the Elliott Hotel, which is managed by Mrs. Burkholder, for a year or so past, and it is said that he has been paying undue attention to Mrs. Burkholder. Read between the lines, people. And some time ago, her husband had his suspicions aroused and warned Gage to leave the Elliott house, which he did not do. Thursday morning, Burkholder started for the place of business, and having forgotten something, returned to the hotel, and finding Gage and his wife together, drew a revolver and commenced shooting at Gage, who tried to run away. Although there is no official record of other witnesses, a young woman who worked with Sarah Burkholder saw the shooting, and her silence was secured through a gift. A picture of the gift is circulating through the room. It is known as the Hush Bible. So by accepting this Bible, she was to not speak of this incident. And eventually she did, as an elderly woman. I think in the 1970s, we have a recording of her, which I almost brought, but I decided not to. We can keep it for another time. But she tells this story, and so she's no longer afraid. And but the Hush Bible is real; it exists, and the picture of it is passing through. Holly, where is the Hush Bible? Where does that reside?
For real?
Yeah.
It's with the family.
And where do they live?
They're in Colorado.
In Colorado. Okay.
Was he killed?
No. I think he was hit by 3 bullets but survived, and no charges were pressed.
How was he dressed?
What's that?
How was he dressed?
I see the point of your question. I don't know. Okay. And so this is the Elliott, and today it's a parking lot, and so this is also in Taos. And so again, you're starting to see the density of these structures, how close they were, and how competitive this market was. All right. Then the Highline Hotel. This is the oddball. You remember the map at the beginning of the presentation where there was one star way to the north of town. Okay. Now, have any of you thought why they chose that location, why they would be north like that instead of in the business district? Anybody want to venture a guess? Go ahead. No. The train. Yes, the train. Exactly. Again, these are folks who are skimming off customers. They are looking for tired travelers getting off the train, and they're right there. Wouldn't you check in? I think I might. Something else that was funny, we talked about wind a little bit earlier. Look, in 1883, there was something that was described as a cyclone coming through Georgetown. They say we don't get tornadoes here, but we do know that we get strong winds. But it was a winter storm, and windows were blown out of the hotel, and the big news about that was bottles of 13-year-old whiskey were lost. So I think the Highline might have been a fun place to stay. So this is where it was, and so the depot right there. So that's the Alpine restaurant today. And so you can see very, very close, and they're getting a jump on everybody else who's in downtown. And that's what's there today. So it's part of the parking lot for the Euro Grill. So about where the spruce tree is forward. All right?
Kevin, do you know
Yes.
where the stagecoaches stop? As opposed to the train you saw, where people would have been left off?
I haven't looked into that. Christine would probably know. Yeah. I know there was an omnibus that would take passengers from the depot to Hotel de Paris, because we have a picture of that being parked in front of the hotel and people standing there with their bags being unloaded. So there was a service that would shuttle them from the depot down to 6th Street, but I don't know much about it beyond that. And then Stanton House. And this is one of the few cases where I actually found a picture of a proprietor. And so that's Aunt Nancy Stanton, Gertrude, my grandmother's name. And she was a very, very powerful person when it came to the hotel industry, really knew her business, and she had many properties under her. The Glenarm Hotel in Denver was under her management. In Idaho Springs, she had one. That one was known as... I need my glasses again. Oh, I'll find it. But so she had one in, it was a spa in Idaho Springs, and then she did not only the Barton House, but the Barton Rooms and the Stanton House. That's a lot of responsibility. And I guess she did a very good job. She employed an able corps of servants. She would renovate properties and prepare them in anticipation of the summer season. So it sounds like she responded to people and their needs. She was known to be a wide-awake, enterprising, and able manager and a genial hostess. She also ran the Spa Hotel. That's the one in the other picture, in Idaho Springs and Glenarm, as I mentioned. And so here you can see those three properties. And so you've got Barton House, which we saw at the beginning. They grew so much they built across the street Barton Rooms, and then Stanton House, which was the McMurdy residence, turned into a hotel. Now remember the second and third circles, the next images, that's what's there today. And so Stanton House is gone. And then there's this little residence right next to Grace Episcopal, and that's where Barton Rooms would have been. Okay? And then we have what I call Mystery on Mac. Okay, Mac is the former name for Spring Street. This establishment, you can see, two-story structure, false front right there, corroborated by the Sanborn map, and that's what's there today. I venture that this may be the Centennial Hotel. You heard me mention that right at the beginning of the presentation. If so, then this hotel offered food and would have been leased by James Lacey in 1881. If indeed this was Centennial Hotel, In 1879, this is the one that hosted 1,485 guests that year. This building seems capable of accommodating this many people. Only further research is needed to confirm this idea. Now, what becomes of all this knowledge? Should we shelve it? Is this it, just tonight? If I do that, I'm afraid that the modern-day visitors to Georgetown and to Hotel de Paris will continue to think that Hotel de Paris was the only hotel in Georgetown, which we know is not the case. So, what I propose is thinking creatively. I think we have an opportunity here to take this information in tonight's program and add a new experience to Georgetown. Perhaps a smartphone, iPad, or tablet application that could be developed and offered for free to cultivate visitors. Wouldn't it be great to see visitors walking the streets of Georgetown with these devices, learning more? Imagine them being aided by these devices, going from site to site, as you just saw, in a small area, so it's very walkable, to learn about our commodious accommodations. And wouldn't it be great to stand in the spots you've seen and then look at the historic images we've seen on that spot? This could be another great reason to come to town, and I think we would all benefit. Exactly. That concludes my presentation, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. We'll start in the front, go back this way.
Yeah, what was the permanent population of Georgetown with 33 hotels?
Well, not all 33 hotels were in operation simultaneously, because you saw that sometimes one property would have several businesses over the years. But my understanding is it was somewhere, the population around 4,000 people, big round numbers.
That's even high.
That's even high?
Yeah, 3,000, 3,500 at the peak.
Okay, so what that tells me is visitation, visitors, people not living here. And then there were several references to summer seasons. And Paul and I talk about this all the time, about how seasonal Georgetown is and can we make it so we have more visitation during the winter. I'm not sure that ever happened. Not to say that we can't do it, but it seems like it's just a seasonal thing for Georgetown. And so I didn't feel quite as bad about how, some of the attractions close during the winter. It's not really a new thing. It would be nice to stretch it out over the year so we could all do better during the winter. And I think that a phone app like this could be one of the ways we can do that. Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an idea of how many rooms were in some of these higher up hotels?
I didn't look at it to that degree. I could probably venture a guess looking at photos, just because of the window and door placements, that sort of thing. But I didn't come across any blueprints that would show me exactly. And a lot of the guest registers aren't in existence anymore. Even like Hotel de Paris, we believe there may be potentially a total of 9 registers, but we know of only 5 that exist. And so we have holes in ours. It's just really hard to say. Hard to say. Great question, though. Mm-hmm.
My great-great-grandfather, Paul Lindstrom, he left the brewery over at Empire, closed the sawmill, and came over and ran the Barton House. And now that my interest is sparked again, I'll do some more research to see what years and exactly what he was doing. Because he was a builder, and he may have been involved in rebuilding the second one, or perhaps the first
Could
one.
be. And that was a name, we spoke briefly before the presentation tonight, and that was a name that I had come across, but I couldn't figure out which hotel he was associated with, so I'm glad you told me, and now I know. So
Because
thank
in
you.
family writings, there's quite a little bit about how he came over and ran the Barton House. So I'll look some more, and maybe it'll say how many rooms there were.
Great. Good.
What he did.
Yeah, I was able to find out if they had a dining room or not, because that was an amenity that really put them in a different league. And so, but amount of rooms, nobody was saying X amount of rooms that I found so far when they were advertising. And you saw some of the ads up there. They weren't saying 50 rooms or anything. They were saying things about scenery. That was a big thing, and an excellent table.
Was there a number
That one says 37 back there. Louis had 14 rooms. So Barton was way bigger. And maybe that's a key from the Barton rooms, not Barton House, but same business. So. Mhm.
I've wondered for a long time if the Hotel de Paris was better known for its food or for its. Now that's a question
Yeah.
we can't answer
Yeah.
probably, but I wondered if the food really attracted the people rather than the room.
I think his food and his wine cellar did. And also, one thing that I came across several times while doing this was he was well known for his coffee. And so he made coffee a special way, and I have to look back at it, but it involved, pouring it over a sugar cube, and if I remember correctly, maybe an orange or something. And so it was something that he felt set him apart because it was fairly well known, his coffee, which makes all the coffee pots that we have and the grinder and the crate, the shipping crate of coffee mean more to me because people were coming there for his coffee. Seems interesting.
Kevin,
Yes, ma'am.
is that key and picture from Bob Hall?
I have that on loan, and I got it from Sharon Racino at HGI, so I don't know where she got it.
Well, I think the key, Buff and I found it in Mac Gordon's house.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's the little white cottage that sits behind the Barton house. Bowman house.
Okay, right, okay.
Okay, we found it in there when we were having it
Wow.
moved up and gave it to Bob and Betty Hall as a gift.
Okay.
They had it framed, I believe.
That must be it then.
I don't know why he had a key, but who knows?
How interesting. Well, and see, there's another way to slice and dice this. Is you could look if we could find an example of each hotel's key. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, there's so much information here, and I mean, you could really research this and expand it greatly. I know of at least 12 hotels in Silver Plume. I had to ignore them just for time constraints. Obviously, I ignored the Peck House. There are so many others in the county that could have been included in this, but just for time, I couldn't do it. But there's more research that needs to be done. It's a great topic. I've enjoyed it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Kevin, I tried to follow the dates, but I couldn't. Did you see there a peak in the hotel occupancy or accommodation?
The only occupancy numbers that were real firm were from 1879.
1870.
Yeah, and I don't know why they collected all of them and published them, but they were published in a newspaper, and that's why I was able to locate them. There wasn't like an organized way of everybody turning in their numbers to one central spot where they could be advertised, and then I could go back and research. And then again, with the registers, missing, non-existent, who knows where. A lot of speculation has to happen, unfortunately. So I'm going to go back to this side. Yes.
I was going to ask you if you have a sense of how many hotels there were at sort of a high activity
Yeah.
period of time.
I figured that question would come up, and I hope I brought the
You wanna raise
answer.
our hands again? No.
I'm not sure I brought that. Well, I'll tell you, if I remember correctly, from, let's say, 1870 to 1880, maybe only about 10 were established. And then, like, 18 were established in the next 6 years. And so what happened was, I think there was demand and the opportunity to make money. And so yes, you get critical mass at some point. I started to make a matrix in trying to figure out all of that, but
So when you say there were 10 and then 18 added, would that be like, you could have had 28 at?
I'd have to look at my notes, but I'll tell you, it was sort of slow and steady for about a decade, and then in a very short amount of time, a number came. Yeah, real fast. Maybe, I would guess so. Train would make an impact. The popularity and boosterism of the town would all have an impact. Sure. Lots of factors.
I assume, and maybe somebody can comment about this, that there was no garbage pickup. Because, we live right where the Doyle house was.
Yeah.
And that place was dug from the 1800s. Every shovelful of dirt I ever dug up, and I dug a lot of shovelfuls of dirt up in the yard, was an artifact. Piece
Yeah,
of porcelain, glass bottle, piece of a bottle, figurines, leather, pieces of metal. It was just covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you start thinking about the infrastructure needed to support all of this business, it's really astounding. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I think a lot of them were put in the outhouses. And the outhouses
Uh-huh.
were moved.
Sure. You had a question?
Why did the business just cease in the early 1900s?
I think it goes back to going off the silver standard and adopting the gold standard. People were just walking away from their homes and businesses in Georgetown. The appeal was gone. The magic was gone. And so, the one constant thing, though, has been the tourism. A lot of these folks, as you saw, were coming to see the sites and for health reasons. And so that hasn't changed at all. The mining has
We're
changed.
down to one hotel, or from back in the day, because your hotel is.
Yeah, and we're just an attraction. The Mahaney House was a hotel and arguably a boarding house, so it still stands. And then the St. James, which is the the Dusty Rose Tea Room, it still stands. So those three still stand. But who's in operation as a hotel today? It would be the Super 8, Hotel Chateau Chamonix, Horseman B&B, and Georgetown Mountain Inn. So not many. And I'm curious about room density and population and all of that too. Those are big questions that I haven't had time to think about. But I don't even know how many rooms we have available and how many beds we have available today in Georgetown, let alone back then at any certain time. I would venture to say we probably don't have enough today to attract conventions or car clubs or things like that would come. We probably need to think about that. Silver Queen B&B closed recently. Rose Street B&B closed recently, so we've lost those rooms, those beds. So somebody needs to open a hotel.
Well, I'm sort of biased, but I'm amazed at Sarah Burkholder,
Oh.
who, when the town was becoming less and less important, really, she was snagging things all over the place, and we always thank her for saving all of our artifacts in the hotel, because we were able to. She kept them. She didn't sell them, make off with them.
Mm-hmm.
She really was
Yeah.
planning a bunch of
Quite a
stuff.
businesswoman.
Yeah.
I mean, to acquire those properties and oversee demolition, I think she was a bit of a visionary, and she was taking care of business. I mean, if they were dilapidated, she wasn't shying away from it. She was going to take care of it. Very interesting person.
What year was the Barton House torn down for the school?
Ooh, well, the school was built, I would guess, in the 1930s.
39.
Yeah.
It opened in 39, didn't it?
But I'd have to look back at that slide to know. But a number of them were demolished in 1907, and other buildings besides hotels at the same time. It seemed to be something that was happening sort of widespread. And do you know why, Christine, 1907?
They were just in horrible shape, a lot of them, and there was a fear of fire. You had ramshackle buildings close together, and some of them were lost to fire, and others people just looked at. They were attracting kids to come in and
Right.
build fires.
Yeah, an attractive nuisance. And I know that at least one of the buildings, one of the hotels was dismantled, and its wood was used to construct 2 cottages elsewhere in town. And unfortunately, those cottages are even gone, so all that material's even gone. So, yes.
Kevin, were there actually 33 different buildings, or were there 33 separate businesses using the existing number of buildings?
33 existing businesses, or businesses in fewer buildings than businesses. So for instance, the Ortley's building, the Monty building, it had like 7 different hotels in operation in that one business. Those are 7 of the 33. Okay, and again, we're not including boarding houses. Up Brown Allen, up Mack Street. I ignored those. And so if you counted those, I mean, we would be, I think, easily beyond 50 if we started counting all boarding houses and things, and brothels.
Next year.
Go ahead. Yes.
You mentioned the American plan and the European plan. What's the difference?
The European plan was like a prefix. You would pay one price and it would be your accommodations and your meals, whereas the American plan was more a la carte. You would pay for only what you wanted. And so Louis, even though he was European, was offering the American plan. So you could come in for a meal. But at times, there was a 35-cent meal available at your establishment. And so they deviated from their plan. They would change their plan, probably depending on what was in demand. But those were the two main types of approaches, the American and the European.
Well, the use of the word house
Aha,
and hotel,
yeah.
did that denote some basic difference?
My gut
or
feeling,
offering?
it is the love that Victorians had for home and hearth, and I think it's the imagery. For the traveler, I think it would be appealing that it's a house, a home away from home. So I think it was more, a warm sort of image, whereas Louis was more formal and called it hotel. But even in the newspapers, they would use them interchangeably. Sometimes it would say American Hotel, and sometimes it would say American House. And so they were sort of loose with it. So I don't think it was a hard and fast rule. I think it was more of that marketing and image they were trying to portray. That's my feeling. Okay, there's another question. Yeah.
I'm just curious, before the train came, what would attract people up here other than just the scenery? It's an awful arduous.
Well, it was harder to travel, but we were established because of mining, and so
I mean, you're not going anywhere west. You pretty much stopped.
Well, there were just like the stereoscopic cards in one of the first slides. Those are from the 1870s probably, and those were printed in great quantities and shipped all over the world, and that was for what was Armchair Traveler. And so Georgetown was well known for its sights and its views.
So they take a mule.
Well, it's a stagecoach to here, and then either walk or in a mule out into the scenery. Yes.
That was it.
Yeah.
Kevin, in that book of Isabella Burr,
Mm-hmm.
lady, she comes to Georgetown just to go to Green Lake.
Right.
And she had to go from Golden City by stage and so forth and so forth and got here.
Yeah.
And then had to find a four-legged critter that would take her up to Green Lake. And this was the beginning of the snowy season.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, this.
So now they can complain about the interstate.
Right. So the interest and demand was there.
I mean, that's an 1870 book.
Yeah. There you go.
And even Naylor Lake was started in 1893 as a fishing club.
Right.
So,
Do you have a question? Yeah. Okay. Well, folks, thank you very much. Appreciate it.